Hey, I'm Brian Bolivar, the worship leader here at Rock Harbor Church, and over the past 12 years or so of leading worship, 10 as a staff member, I've made many mistakes. So in this video, I want to talk through my mistakes and hopefully help you not make the same ones I did. I heard a quote recently that I thought was really good, that we don't learn anything from the triumph, but we learn from the mistakes. And so through this process of, Sunday after Sunday for the past 12 years, I made a lot of mistakes, but I know I've learned from each one, so I want to take the time of this video to walk through the 10 common mistakes that I've made to help you along your worship leading journey. And if you'd like access to online courses and coaching for your worship and tech ministry, head over to churchfront.com to apply for a free call today. And the number one mistake that I've made is the lack of preparation. Now that doesn't mean that I'm not ready to go for every part of the service, but it could be things like waiting too long to schedule people, waiting too long to schedule the set list itself, maybe not checking in with the team members of the practices because we might show up to a Thursday night rehearsal and someone's not there and we weren't ready for that, and then we have to adjust from there. So of course there's all kinds of ways to be prepared and show up prepared, but the main thing is just getting ourselves enough time, because things will always kind of go wrong, unfortunately, just kind of the nature of doing ministry work, tech stuff, personnel stuff, we can never know what can happen. But when we take the time to be as prepared as possible up front, when things do rise up, which they will, we'll have the flexibility to know that, hey, we've got that stuff ready to go. We've got the songs ready to go. For me, that looks like having songs memorized because that's how I do worship. So when things happen, but we're prepared, we can handle those things in confidence, because ultimately, when we're not prepared, there's just a certain amount of anxiety, there's a certain amount of stress that comes with that. So taking the time ahead of time to be prepared is the way to not make the mistake of being unprepared. Number 2 is not paying attention to the congregation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, as worship leaders and musicians, we love to challenge ourselves and we love to play the coolest, newest song, for instance. But if that song doesn't resonate with our congregation, what are we doing it for? We want to always make sure we're serving our congregation. And how we do that is by listening and paying attention. We all know that oftentimes we'll hear that it's too loud, or, the sanctuary is too hot, or, those kind of stereotypical things that we all talk about. But, leaning into the needs of the congregation. So how do we fix that? How have I learned from that? Well, I might try a song that just didn't resonate. It might be my favorite song in the world, but sometimes, songs that we do in our personal preparation time and songs that translate into Sunday morning are different depending on our congregation. So always being sensitive to the congregation in terms of worship and tech, I think, is the way that we can serve our congregation at its best. And number 3, poor transitions. I know that definitely when I first got started leading worship, unless I was singing a song, it was pretty awkward. When I first started, I remember praying was like the scariest thing I could think of. Publicly praying, what do you mean? I can't do that. That's what I do in the private time. So it's those things that we're not rehearsing that. And if you need to, that's okay. You can rehearse a prayer. I mean, the Lord's Prayer is one we all know, so you can practice that. Just getting in the mindset of being a public prayer. Or also, there might be times in the song where, there's some instrumental breaks and we need to figure out, how do we fill that space? And sometimes it might be stepping back and just playing, but also just being aware of those transitions from song to song. And the one way that I like to do that is through having common keys. So, if we're playing a song, and we talked about that in another video, if we're playing a song in the key of A, the next song I'm going to want to play usually in A, E, or D, the relative, 4th or 5th of the scale. So it's just those little things that we can do ahead of time, again, pointing back to the preparation piece, that will give our worship transitions just the smoothest possible thing, because fumbling around in our words is fine, and we all have to learn. You can't really learn leading worship until you're leading worship. So, taking the time to think through the transitions between songs is a way to set your worship team up for success. And number 4, common worship leader mistakes is not addressing technical problems from week to week. Now, I'm so guilty of this. I always feel like, that microphone's busted on Sunday. It'll just be fixed by the following week. And then when you get to church on Sunday and you're like, I didn't do anything about the microphone. This is not going to be good. And, there is grace for that. Technical things happen, but if you have the same technical issue 2-3 Sundays in a row, it will fall on us in our role to be over that, because if you're like me, you're over the worship and the technical side as well. and a lot of other things, let's be honest. But, as far as making sure those technical things are taken care of, it's just so important because I get really stressed out when microphones are working or screens aren't turning on. And again, that happens. Technology fails us. But when we take the time to, throughout the week, order a new piece of gear that we need or, get that fixed or get it looked at, it's just going to save so much time and unnecessary nervousness and all of the anxiety that comes with not taking care of those tech issues. So it's important to just take care of those as soon as possible. And number 5, common worship leader mistake is being afraid of conflict. Now maybe it's just me, but I do not enjoy conflict in any way. I know I'm a peacemaker by nature, so it's my goal to have everyone at peace at all times, which of course isn't really possible. But when it comes to avoiding conflict, there might be someone who, shows up to rehearsal and they're just not following the rules, or they're consistently late, or, unprepared, or, a tech person's just calling out over and over again. Whatever the case may be, it's always a unique journey. But I found that after doing this for a while, even through my own desire to not have conflict, we don't have to have conflict in like a dramatic way, but I'm really big into like addressing the elephant in the room these days. We all have leadership meetings where like everyone has to come in, and really the leader just wants to kind of address one person, but they're kind of telling the whole group. And the reality is in my experience, like the person who needs to hear it won't, and the people who don't need to hear it, they're the ones who get insecure and they're like, what am I doing wrong? Can I do it better? So I just feel like it's just easier and saves time and more efficient to just directly address, because we're in church world here. There's usually not anything too wild that goes on that can't just be solved with a simple conversation or encouragement. Because it might be that someone's in a season where they're not supposed to be serving right now. They've got too much going on. So just having that open line of communication is definitely a way to address those things. And avoiding conflict, just like with the last point, with avoiding the technical issues, if we avoid conflict, all it's going to do is grow. Just kind of taking it on head on and addressing those issues is going to save you so much time and energy that you can put towards the positive side of being in worship ministry. And number 6 is a lack of team development. Now, what I mean by that, it's just doing simple things like weekly rehearsals. When I first started off, we didn't really do rehearsals. It wasn't part of the church's culture. And it was always like show up Sunday morning and just hope for the best. Or there was like maybe a monthly rehearsal or something like that for new songs. But just getting in the routine of actually practicing week in and week out will help develop your team. Because chances are, if you are the head of your ministry, and even if you're not, you're watching, the Churchfront channel, you're probably giving more time, energy, and effort into your ministry. So you might show up more prepared than other people. But as, in the context of a leader, looking at all of the nuance of your team and saying, hey, maybe I need to encourage that person to dig into, Chart Builder more, or I might, even things like attending conferences as a team. There's probably a church type ministry or worship ministry conference, coming in your area. Maybe it's Churchfront Live, which you should definitely go to, that you can pour into your team, because when a team is poured into, they feel valued, and when they're valued, they know that they're an important part of what's going on at the particular church that you're at. So doing things like that, weekly rehearsals, or giving resources, sending, hey, I saw this video, this awesome drum cam that this worship drummer is sharing, their inner mix, and send it to your drummers. Be like, look what they do, look how they approach that. Little things like that where you're not trying to guilt anyone or make anyone feel bad, but you're just kind of pouring in and keeping that relationship going. And so as we develop our team, we take the time to develop our team as we're still developing our own skills, but we're developing our team. Everyone gets better, and then when everyone gets better, the ministry gets better, and the congregation goes in more, and it's just a positive snowball. But it all kind of starts with equipping and, encouraging your team. And number 7, and this is probably, there's no most important, but this may be the most important, is ignoring our own spiritual growth. I think it's really easy as, a ministry leader or someone who works at church or serves at church a lot to say, oh, well, I don't need to do Devo time because, I do it, at church. We're worshiping the Lord all the time, and I know that might be an extreme example, but I think it can be easy. I know in my own life, it can be so easy to be like, oh, well, I'm doing my Devo. Next thing I know, I'm like, going through, lyrics out there in the morning. And that's not a bad thing, because it is all worship. But there's something to be said for like inputting, not always outputting, because when you're in a leadership capacity or a serving capacity, that's a lot of output. And sure, we input as we hang out with people and we do life, we do church with other people. But neglecting that morning or evening or whatever that Devo time is for you, I think is probably the foundation for it all. I know we're trying to lead from a place of overflow, but if we're not taking in enough, we're not spending enough time with the Lord, then we've got nothing to overflow. And then we're just kind of hoping on a wing and a prayer, that God will give us what we need to do that thing, whatever capacity we're in. So yeah, that's been a big thing for me that I've developed over time. And it's certainly not easy. And that doesn't mean you have to be militant or religious about it. And it's like, oh, I missed my Devo yesterday, so obviously worship's going to be terrible this Sunday. I don't think God is like that. God will give you what you need as you need it. But being intentional and spending time with the Lord is the foundation for any great worship ministry member. And number 8 is making big changes before, big services like an Easter or Mother's Day or Christmas. There's a temptation for me anyways, to be like, oh yeah, we need to get the new sound system in. And again, I'm using some extreme examples here, but honestly, I've walked through a lot of these and I'm pulling from my own experience. So it's not like I'm making this, up for illustration. I have walked and lived this, and I'm hoping to help you not have to do it the way I did. So I remember there was one time where it was a Father's Day weekend and we had a new sound system put in. And I love telling this story, but there was a sound system, and basically when we went to go and do the service, nothing was coming out of the mains. We had this this system put in that week, and we're like, what do we do? So basically we made the decision because we were getting audio that was coming through the floor wedges, because at that time we were still running wedges. And we're like, what are we going to do? So we just ran the whole service out of wedges, and it was fine, and probably not even most people even noticed. But come the next week, we figured out that in this we had a GLD 80, was the first digital console this church had. And the DCAs were like muted, but they were like deep in layers. So the volunteers, and myself included, didn't really know what that meant. So the way that we avoid that, is, for one, some of that stuff I guess you can avoid. But two, kind of being intentional about how we integrate sound system. Like here at Rock Harbor, through Jake and Churchfront and all the great stuff that's been happening, we've kind of been taking it one step at a time, and it may be a new build for your church and you're doing it all at once, but just, the timing of that and the intentionality is key. It's not so much how you do it, it's just the way you approach it. So thinking through, okay, well, I remember actually here, we had the LV1 sitting back in the closet, and we're like, we're going to do this new install. It's like, well, maybe we just wait till after Easter before we start doing it. And we did, and everything rolled out great, and we had very little hiccups, So without the pressure of those kind of annual, or those big services, anniversary services, or what have you, I think it just is a smarter way to approach any kind of new gear integration. Number 9 is a lack of flexibility. So for me, I like to plan and I like to think through things. And so in the past, had a bad habit of like, well, what do you mean you want to do a different song? Or what do you mean you want to add this element to service? Or, whatever, there's a million examples of that. So being flexible, I think, is critical to ministry, because there are times, especially, as we're trying to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. Because I always say the role of a worship leader is to both lead the congregation, but also follow the Holy Spirit kind of simultaneously. So even when it comes down to things like service planning, I think it's really critical. Now, that doesn't mean that every week you should be okay with like changing the entire set. That's extreme examples. But, being okay with little changes, because ultimately I know, and I can say this from experience, that anytime we've kind of done those little shifts here and there, the service is stronger and better for it. So that's why being flexible is an important piece of being a good worship ministry leader. Number 10 is overloading the schedule. Worship leading and worship ministry is fun and enjoyable, and that's why we're a part of it. So there's a temptation. I remember my first Christmas on staff at a church. I wanted to do everything. It's like, yeah, we'll do special videos. Yeah, we'll lead, a whole Christmas concert extravaganza. We'll do worship. We'll do all the things. And then I remember sitting there with, at that time, our first child, and Christmas night, I was like, I didn't focus on my family stuff at all. I did so much for the church because it was fun that I kind of completely neglected my own home life, which I know that's a common thing that, we can fall into. And it's no one's fault, but our own, because we want to do it all and we want to overload. And my thought is we can do all those things. We can do everything we want to do. And first we seek the kingdom first, and then all will be added, So God, what do you want me to do in this season? God, how do you want me to handle, this thing I'm really excited about? How does the timeline look? Because we can handle all that stuff, but we just have to take our time. Like, for instance, here at Rock Harbor, we've been planning to start releasing Rock Harbor original worship songs. So we've got all the gear we've been capturing, but instead of just, okay, we finally have a song recorded, let's just put it out. We're going to wait for 6 months, to probably the beginning of the new year before we start actually putting songs out, to take our time and not rush it. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, and trying to follow God's leading and timing in that. And then all comes down to not overloading our schedule. And the final thing, and this is this is specific to singers, is not neglecting vocal health. I know that there was a time where I was leading 5 services a week, youth, and then 4 on the weekends. And my voice started kind of going out, it started getting gruff and all those things because I wasn't doing what I should do. And obviously, if you are a vocalist, your voice really matters, because if you are hoarse or if you get sick or, just kind of taking care of yourself in a healthy way is important. Every morning I go through 3 or 4 vocalizing exercises, just a YouTube playlist where I just run through the scales over and over again. And it's just like going to the gym for your throat, So that helps me not only just become a better vocalist overall, but it just keeps my voice strong and primed. And you may be a volunteer and you'd be like, well, I only sing, once a month, so, what does it matter? Well, I would say it definitely matters, because if you are only up every so often, I would say and encourage you to be at your best every time you're up. And how do we do that? We just take care of ourselves. We make sure to, do the things. We drink water. We stay hydrated. We do vocalize and we don't blow out our voice. Because I know for me, one of the biggest things of being a vocalist is doing the whole mixed voice thing where I'm not just yelling. Because when I first started, I came up kind of in the punk rock scene and we just yelled a lot. It was all chest voice and that was it. So through the vocalizing, I've learned how to do the mixed voice thing, and that's really helped my voice, because we do 2 services here now, and I rarely have any kind of vocal fatigue after that. And that just comes through the daily kind of hitting the vocal gym. So I would definitely recommend, being aware of your vocal health and just your physical health overall, because that will help you be a better part of what God's doing through your ministry. So I hope going through these 11 things helps show you that, for one, we all make mistakes, and 2, there are ways to kind of work through those things. There's grace for it all. God knows that we can't be perfect. We shouldn't even try to be perfect, but I thought of a quote as I was preparing this that, today's mistakes equals tomorrow's wisdom. So I know that as, we do these things Sunday in and Sunday out, things will happen. But it's kind of taking that 30,000-foot view and being like, okay, well, that happened. How do I keep it from happening next time? And then if it happens again, then you keep refining and keep refining. And through that process, making, like I said in the beginning of the video, we don't learn anything in the triumphs or, those mountaintop moments. I don't know if that's completely true, but I know that I've learned a lot more in the valley, in those mistakes, to learn what not to do for next time. So I hope walking through these things will show you that, yes, you're going to make mistakes, but there's room to grow and improve, and you will learn and grow and improve through the mistakes. And also, I want to say that you don't have to do this alone. There are tons of great resources out there, like on Churchfront, where you can find people to have community with. There's a Churchfront Facebook group. There's all kinds of groups out there that can help you. Because I know for me, like when I first started, it was like, you're the worship leader now, go. And that's a common story. I hear that a lot, And so, especially with today's kind of connected society with the internet, we don't have to do it alone. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get involved in groups. And you can definitely go to churchfront.com and you can get tons of resources for your tech and worship team. So don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to reach out. We love to help you. This channel exists to help you with your church, both tech and worship ministries. So don't let that just a thing that you hear and just don't do anything with. If you need help, just reach out and ask. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.